So Trump now has an indictment. And again, I'm going to try to spend only 10 minutes on this. Trump got a new indictment in an election subversion case. Let me bring y'all up to date on the news, and then we're going to go from there. Make sure y'all hit a like for the algorithm, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications.
Special Counsel Jack Smith has just filed a superseding indictment in the federal election interference case against the former president, Donald Trump. Let's go straight to CNN's Caitlin Polance. Caitlin, this is just happening right now. What more do we know?
That's right. This is the special counsel's effort to get this case back on the road toward trial. This is the January 6th federal election case in court in Washington, D.C. against Donald Trump. The charges, the 4 charges that Donald Trump has been facing for quite some time now, they're the same in this what's called a superseding indictment. So a rewritten version of the criminal charges against the former president for conspiracy and other counts related to what he did after the 2020 election. But what the special counsel's office is saying they're doing here is they needed to go back to the grand jury, Phil, and rewrite those charges so that they would incorporate what they need to say that's in line with what the Supreme Court told them they must do. Remember, the Supreme Court just in June made that decision on presidential immunity, saying that some of the things in this case had to be cut out, such as things that were allegations that may be part of Donald Trump's official duties as president, especially his interactions with others below him in the administration. So I'm still going through the superseding indictment documents that we have. It's a 36-page document. And so what we have here now in this filing is that there are co-conspirators listed, but one of those people that we had before that would have been heard by many people on the jury if it had gone to trial, there would have been a lot of information about that official, Jeffrey Clark. He's not one of the co-conspirators anymore. He was a Justice Department official. Now it is 6 different private people, 5 private attorneys plus a private political consultant. Those are the people that are called co-conspirators here before the grand jury and now in this indictment against Donald Trump.
Caitlin, you kind of walked through the process, how we got here on some level. I think my biggest question, given how closely you followed this, did you expect this when and I know you're still going through it right now, you've just started reading through a pretty lengthy document. What about this is surprising based on what we've known coming up to this point?
Well, what's surprising is the timing here. I mean, we are right before the election. We're not in that window where the Justice Department doesn't want to do anything that disrupts the election, the 60-day period, but we're nearing the end of August. And at the end of this week, we are expecting, Phil, the Justice Department to tell the judge what they want to do for the path forward. This appears to be one of the steps to take to move things forward and to set up the next phase of this case. And the way the special counsel describes this in sending this out to the public is that they say that they brought this indictment before a new grand jury, one that had not heard about this case before, that had approved the indictment against Donald Trump previously, that they approved it. That is the process for an indictment. It has to go before a grand jury of more than 20 people. And it reflects the efforts to implement the Supreme Court's holdings and what to do next. And so what this does today is it kicks off that next phase so that the Justice Department can continue attempting to prosecute this case in a way that they have said for some time now they want to happen as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible. They're not waiting to Friday to tell us what they're going to do next.
And why are they doing this as quickly as possible? Let's ask ourselves a question. Let's remember this. They are doing this merely weeks before voters began casting their ballots in 2024 presidential election, but a trial is not expected to happen anytime soon. Let me say that again. They're doing this and they're rushing this through merely weeks. Why? I have my own theories, I have my own thoughts, and I'm going to share this with you right now. I believe that they are trying to do the same thing that they've been trying to do prior to him even being selected as the Republican official presidential candidate of the United States of America. They are participating and trying to influence the presidential election, and I believe that this is election interference. This is officially, in my opinion, election interference. They're trying to rush this through. They hate him, They want to change our minds and our perspectives now that they weren't able to influence and then impact the fact that they wanted to remove them off of certain ballots in certain states in the first place. And this is classic election interference in which they're trying to rush this into the minds and the hearts of the people and trying to make this a news story, knowing that this is a non-issue and this is not something that he's guilty of in the first place. So then they went back to the Supreme Court and they had them revise this in order for them to be able to refile it and rush it through merely weeks before people start to cast their ballots for the presidential election. I'm going to get J.D. Vance's perspective on this, and so we're going to spin over to that. J.D. Vance was getting off a plane in order to, go to and do another rally and go to another event in order to take questions and then give his thoughts in Nashville. And so J.D. Vance had to respond to this, and they asked him the question as usual because he's always taking questions off script, just like everybody else, except for Kamala Harris and her campaign. And this is what he had to say about it. You're walking down the stairs much different than Biden used to. Hey, notice how he didn't just get straight in the truck like Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and get in the bus. What did he do? The first thing that he did is he went and shook hands, and then he went straight over to the reporter and see what's happening. And he's with his wife. They got their phones out. All right, let's go ahead and get this. Let's get these questions off then.
There we go. Good. Okay, let's go this way.
Yeah, go the other way.
Okay. Hi. Can you respond to the superseding indictments against former President Donald Trump?
Yeah, I haven't read the whole thing, but it looks like Jack Smith doing more of what he does, which is filing these absurd lawsuits in an effort to influence the election.
Agreed.
I mean, the one thing that I did see, which I felt was just classic lipstick on a pig, is, of course, the reason the Supreme Court threw out his lawsuit is because they said it implicated the president's official acts, of course, which the president has immunity in conducting those official acts. And yet Jack Smith tried to redefine Mike Pence as from the vice president to the running mate, as if somehow changing those words in an indictment undercuts the fact that Mike Pence is still the sitting vice president and it still directly implicates the president's official acts. So I don't think that it changes anything legally. I think it's clearly an effort to try to do more election interference from Jack Smith. He should be ashamed of himself, and it's one of the reasons why we have to win, because he should not be anywhere near power.
He don't dodge no questions, do he? And he said that, listen, I haven't even read the whole thing, but this is exactly what the breakdown is. It's election interference. We know what's going on. Him changing the wording of it should not undermine what the Supreme Court threw out in the first place. It's election interference in a classic case. From a C student's perspective, right, and he's a Yale graduate, from a C student's perspective, he just telling you straight up. He said, listen, man, this is lipstick on a pig and this is election interference. It's the reason why they're trying to rush this through.
Oh, Henry?
Henry? No? Okay.
Well, Senator, I know the Harris-Walz campaign has talked about that Supreme Court ruling, saying that it goes too far to give the former president, too much immunity. Yeah. Your thoughts as this new indictment goes forward?
Well, I think just my pushback on what they said is, look, if the president doesn't have some level of immunity in how he conducts his office, in the same way that judges have to have immunity, police officers have to have immunity, there has to be some recognition that people can't be sued for doing their job. And, the way that I think about it is try to make this nonpartisan. Barack Obama ordered drones to strike an American citizen in Yemen. That's like the definition of murder, unless you recognize the president has some immunity in conducting his official acts. So I just don't understand how you can even have a president of the United States if there's no immunity in how they do their job.
But putting former President Trump aside for a second, is that still not too broad, the level of immunity that the Supreme Court grants presidents? Where does that limit end?
Look, I think what they did was actually pretty sensible, right? They tried to sort of carve out, there has to be some range where the president can act within that range without having his livelihood destroyed. But of course, the president, there are some things that are clearly personal. The president doesn't have immunity there. So I thought the way they actually divided that conduct and tried to protect the president's official duties, that seems sensible to me.
want to ask you, you talked about a few bullet points on immigration, goals for immigration. When it comes to catch and release, to fight off one of them, how do you define catch and release? And can you give me your assessment of how the Trump administration handled that in the first term? Were they able to end catch and release in that 4 years?
Well, of course, there were a lot of lawsuits filed during the Trump administration. They did try to end catch and release. There was some pushback from some organizations, but I actually think that they got a lot of victories towards the end, and it's one of the reasons why you saw illegal border crossings go so low. I mean, the way that I think about a catch and release is if somebody comes into this country and they claim that they have a right to be here either via asylum or some other process, you can't sort of say, all right, great, here's a number, come back in 9 years when you have a court date, because one, you're never going to hear from those people to begin with, and two, even if you do, that's 9 years they're able to float around in our country without any real accountability. That's what I find so preposterous. Like when people come in, you process them, you adjudicate their claims, either they stay or they have to go back, but you can't just let them float around the United States for years or even longer.
Is there something that the Trump administration, just to follow up on that, is there something that the Trump administration was doing on catch and release in those 4 years, or your own idea of how to, gives you an idea of how to, or the best way forward and how to end that?
Well, the most important thing is you have to actually not allow people to float around in the United States to begin with, which is why the Remain in Mexico policy was so important, right? Is you actually gave people who had legitimate asylum claims, if you have to sit in Mexico while those claims are adjudicated, then maybe you're actually less likely to come and make that claim unless it's very real. If you know you're going to be released into the country, given a work permit, given health care benefits at taxpayer expense, a lot of traditional economic migrants are going to come in and use the asylum system to basically run in and around our immigration laws, which is exactly what we're seeing under Kamala Harris.
I believe that Tim Walz is in trouble, and I believe that Kamala Harris is in trouble. Honest to God. I know we're supposed to be talking about this Trump case and everything like that, but when I hear this guy speak, Tim Walz should be very afraid. Very afraid. I think that both of them, I think that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz is shaking in their boots. It's no way in hell that you're going to tell me that a Tim Walz is prepared to face a J.D. Vance in a debate. Listen, I'm more excited to cover the vice presidential debate than I am to cover the presidential debate. I mean, it was spectacular to watch Biden absolutely suffer. And I think that Trump is going to absolutely mop the floor with Kamala Harris if she doesn't get the questions ahead of time like Hillary Clinton. But J.D. Vance, listen, I am becoming a fan of this guy every single day. Tim Walz is in trouble. This guy is sharp. He don't need no script. He take his questions. You can ask him anything. He ain't tripping about it. And he got an Indian wife. And Indian wives are incredibly smart. I'm just telling you, they're incredibly smart. I think that Tim Walz and Kamala Harris is in trouble. Obviously, I think that this is election interference, so there's nothing more to say about that, but I think that they're in trouble, 100%. I think that they're going to absolutely suffer on that debate stage. The one thing that they are not looking forward to, and that they are really, really trying to figure out how they can get out of that, they hope that they don't debate these people, because Tim Walz is going to suffer. Kamala Harris is going to get mopped up, and I am willing to bet money on that. I am willing to bet money all day, every day, 100%. They have no chance whatsoever.